As they traveled further and further east, the streets began becoming dingier and dingier. It started off as litter and a few empty cans and ancient newspapers tossed here or there, then escalated. Mounds of crap were piled everywhere, from old toys to broken glass to bits of paper and food wrappers. The whole area began to smell increasingly vile. Everyone but Terezi resorted to breathing through their hands as they stepped through the pile after pile of trash. It wasn't the only thing stinking up the place, but John avoided to think of what else the dark lumps in the streets might be. He definitely had seen blood, however crusted and dark, but of blue and green color. Jade's hand was clenched to his arm, above his elbow, and had for some time. Kirkette and Solix both looked uneasy. The group had stopped talking over an hour ago. Only Terezi looked unfazed, stepping over piles of muck with precision, as if she could see them. She had mentioned that she grew up on the east side. John was admiring her more by the minute. Every instinct he had told him that it wasn't a safe place to be. It had grown eerily quiet. The only sound was footsteps and quick breathing. They hadn't seen anyone else for some time. From what they had gathered from Kanaya and Terezi, talking quietly earlier, the east side was more populated. People just tended to stay out of sight. John looked up to the sky and the multitude of stars, and was thinking how, looking up, he could almost forget where he was, when a scream tore through his ear. His head snapped as he turned to Jade, whose grip had become vice-like. She was gasping, looking down to her right. Kanaya pressed forward, her eyes wide, and kneeled down next to Jade, staring at something that at first glance John mistook for a pile of rags, until it moved. Looking closer, John could see now that it was a troll, with long pointed horns and wild matted hair. She was covered in dirt, her clothes torn. She extended a shaky arm, which John could see Jade had bumped into. "Help me." Her voice was a wavering whisper. "How long have you been out here?" Kanaya said quietly. "Days," she said. "Shade. So burns not that bad. But I don't want to die here." Kirkette knelt beside Kanaya, putting a hand on the girl's forehead. "How far along are you? Can you walk?" She shook her head. "Where do you live?" "It's not far. Just around the corner. In the basement. That store." She pointed, her hand shaking ahead of them. "Okay," Kanaya said. "We're gonna take you home." She then pulled the girl into a sitting position, and with Kirkette, pulled her upright. She was the same height as John, but looked almost hollow, her cheekbones and collarbones protruding sharply from her skin. Kanaya reached below her and scooped her up, bridal style. The girl's head lolled forward as Kanaya walked easily. The girl seemed to weigh nothing. The rest of the group trailed behind her. "What's wrong with her?" John whispered to Kirkette. "She's dying," Kirkette whispered, staring at the ground. "But why? What happened?" "Nothing happened. She's just got old, and now she's gonna die." A pit formed in John's stomach. "What part of fatal disease doesn't make sense to you?" Kirkette continued. "None of us are gonna stick around for long." John didn't answer. What had seemed so distant was now coming into focus. Forget the skin color and the eyes. He should be worrying about the dying part, which seemed to be glossed over by everyone else. They reached the corner, which used to be a jewelry store, and went inside. The glass counters were all smashed, but the shards of glass had been swept away. In the back there was a staircase down, and they took it. They reached a small door, which everyone ducked through, and emerged in a good-sized room. The floor was concrete, but covered in throw rugs. A couple of ratty pieces of furniture sat in the middle. In one corner of the room were 2 beds, each with quilts that looked to be sewn out of pieces of old drapes or carpet. Kanaya crossed the room and gently laid the girl down on one of the beds. "Thank you," she said. "I had to get water 2 days ago, but I couldn't make it back." "But don't you live with someone?" Kanaya asked, gesturing to the other bed. "Why couldn't they get it?" The girl gave a sad smile. "He didn't make it either. A few months back. The bastard always said he'd outlive me. Liar." Terezi slung her backpack forward and removed one of the water bottles, coming forward and pressing it to the girl's lips. She drank greedily, slurping it up. "Do you need food?" Jade asked, coming forward. The girl shook her head. "It's a little late for that, I think. But I do have food." She pointed across the room to the cupboard, leaning against the wall. "We had a lot. Please take some." "No, we couldn't possibly. I'm gonna be dead very soon. I won't eat it. You're good people. Please?" Karkat crossed the room and quickly began stuffing the contents of the cupboard into his backpack. "What's your name?" Kanaya asked. The girl's eyes fluttered. "Mafira. I'm Kanaya." "Pretty name, but I'm afraid I can't stick around. So tired." "She's advancing stages," Solix muttered out of the corner of his mouth. Kanaya nodded, then gently tugged the quilt out from under Mafira and pulled it over her. "You go to sleep now, all right? It'll all be fine when you wake up." Mafira's eyes were already closed, but she nodded and smiled. "Night," she slurred, then fell silent, asleep. Karkat returned, and Kanaya gestured to leave. "We have to come here on our way back, to bury her," she said to no one in particular. Then they turned toward the stairs. Just as John was about to leave, he heard Mafira shortly cry out. He turned around, but her eyes were still shut. Karkat grabbed his arm. "They all make that noise. There's nothing left we can do." John felt sick to his stomach, as an image of Jade flashed in his mind. Jade in the bed, with her eyes closed, emaciated face, and tangled hair. "Is that what it's like all the time?" he asked, not wanting to know the answer. "Yeah, dying's not pretty," Solix answered. "Sometimes it takes weeks." Somehow, John had always pictured dying of the disease like you just suddenly fall over and you're gone. Something of that nature. Not anything like what he had just seen. And to hear the process was drawn out. I can't," he stuttered, trying to articulate his feelings into words. "Yes, it's terrifying. We get it. The life we got dealt sucks ass. We can't do jack shit about it," Karkat answered. "It's just better to try and not think about it." "I'd rather be killed," he said half to himself as they walked along the dark streets, several silent minutes later. "Right there with you," Karkat replied, "but sometimes we don't get a choice." "Quiet," Kanaya said suddenly, and Terezi paused. "We're here." John stared up. Here turned out to be a building, low and flat, with windows blocked out by black curtains and lettering that read 8 Ball. "She'll have guards," Terezi said. "They already know we're here." "So?" "So we'd be dead if she thought we were a threat. Let's pay a visit, shall we? Stay close." The group climbed up together, Kanaya turning and bringing up the rear. John ended up being shoved between Solix and Jade. Terezi pushed the smooth wood door, and it opened soundlessly. The interior was dim. A few flickering lights lit up the several abandoned tables and chairs. A pool table could be seen in the corner. The colors on the balls faded. In the middle of the room was a staircase down. Could be clearly seen. Terezi started forward, but just as she was about to step down, an arm swiped in front of her. She stepped back, and a man dressed in all black seemed to melt out of the air. At least John thought he was a man. He was tall, but by the little he could see under the man's wide-brimmed hat, he looked older than anyone in Haven so far. Only one of his eyes glowed. The other was covered in a dark patch. "What business do you have down there?" he said. His voice was smooth, casual tone. I need to speak to the Sylph. Who are you, anyways?" "The name's Slick. And who might you be?" "Redglare. You've heard of me." Slick bared his teeth in a grin. "Yes, I have. Good little bounty hunter you are, then. Are you armed?" "No." "Yes, you are. You don't live here by being dumb. Leave your weapons on the table. All of them. If we find one while you're downstairs, consider all your throats slit." Terezi shrugged and threw her cane on the table. "Do as he says," she addressed the rest of them. John removed the knife from his jacket with shaky hands, dropping it on the table. He could feel Slick's eyes boring into him. "All right, you can head down, but I don't expect any trouble." "Oh, you know me, Jack," Terezi said pointedly. "I like to lead a quiet life." She started down the stairs, Slick settling back down in his chair. The rest of them followed. The staircase curved as they descended. John could begin to hear music. "Well, I guess this was a nightclub," Carquette commented nervously. The bottom of the staircase arrived quickly, and John wouldn't want it to. And they walked into the spacious room. It was dark and hazy, with smoke, half of the room covered in round tables and chairs. The other was just floor. A fragile-looking piano sat in the corner of the room, and jazz music was playing out of unseen speakers. "What do we have here?" a woman's voice said. John could see her outline, someone with a wide-brimmed hat and a jacket sitting with her feet on the table, legs crossed. "Some more of your servants?" An elegant spiral of smoke poured out of her mouth as she spoke, her eyes glittering from beneath the brim of her hat. "That's enough, Snowman," another voice said, coming from what looked like a large, ornate chair in the middle of a small stage area. Terezi stepped forward to the woman, lounging in the chair. "Urania, it's been too long." The woman smiled, showing long, pointed teeth. "If it isn't my adopted little sister. What brings you here?" "You know why." "Yes, and I do agree. It's high time we discussed the matter of Mindfang." "How long has she been like this?" Carquette muttered grumbly, tipping his chair back so it stood on two legs. "Beats me. Like half an hour, I guess," Solix answered from next to him. John exhaled, staring at the figures of Terezi and Urania, deep in conversation across the room. He turned to Jade, who had removed her glasses and was polishing them on the corner of her sweatshirt. She looked up, catching John's eye and giving a quick grin. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Snowman was sitting just a table over, glaring at them beneath her hat and occasionally exhaling a puff of smoke in their direction. Kanaya was twitchy, turning to glare at Terezi every few seconds, subconsciously reaching her hand into her jacket, probably in search of some sort of weapon. The thought of all of them, the sharp objects upstairs, made John feel slightly more at ease, but it clearly terrified Kanaya. "Why did she say adopted sister?" Jade asked after another moment of silence. Terezi and Vriska used to live down here when they were little. I think Urania took them in at some point, arguably too late, however. Kanaya answered quickly, leaning forward. What do you mean? Well, you've seen how unstable she is. She has her whole gimmick of doing what's right and restoring justice, but in reality she's killed almost as many people as Mindfang. I would say that she's even more dangerous considering she doesn't understand herself. Understand herself? She grew up here. She can't survive on this side of the main street by being... You can't survive here on this side of the main street without being even relatively sane. From what I could gather, it had her first kill at age 7 and developed her persona as regular not long after. Urania did take her in, but it was too late. Too late for what? Terezi said, appearing suddenly over Kanaya's shoulder, who froze. Nothing. Are you done? Almost. I need the map. Urania stood a few feet behind Terezi, arms crossed. She was dressed in skin-tight black material that looked like leather. From boots to long gloves, her hair was wavy, cascading down her back, and horns looking like slightly longer versions of Vriska. Her lips were blue from lipstick, John supposed, and pressed together. An aura of power radiated off of her, making her seem taller and powerful. John's first instinct seeing her up this close was to back away slowly. With a rustle of paper, Terezi produced the map and handed it backwards. John noted that, like Mindfang's, Urania's nails were filed to appear as claws. She unfolded and quickly glanced over it, smirking. This is excellent detail. Very nice work. Her words sounded like a teacher praising a particularly good homework assignment. Out of place in the basement of a nightclub. She then beckoned Terezi away again. Why can't we know what they're saying again? Solix asked, fiddling with his hoodie strings. Because we're untrustworthy, Karkat said, adding air quotations. Solix made an irritated noise in his throat. All right, Terezi said, walking back towards the table with the map folded in her hand. Let's get out of here. Fucking finally, Karkat muttered, jumping up. Red glare, Urania said as the group reached the stairwell. It would be most wise for you to comply with our agreement. Terezi nodded, then turned and started up the stairs. Karkat and Solix, then Jade and Kanaya, and finally Joan followed suit. Rising away from the smoky room, with the soft music and intimidating females. They exited the stairs to find Slick in the middle of the room, swinging Kanaya's chainsaw around and making explosion sounds. Psst! Boom! Gotcha! Kanaya cleared her throat loudly. Slick jumped and dropped the chainsaw. It clattered to the floor. Rolling her eyes, Kanaya strode forward and collected it. Sorry about that, he was saying. I didn't think you'd come back. Most don't. They just go down, want to see her about some problem or another, and then that's next thing you know, I'm hauling them out to the dumpster. He chuckled. Guess you guys are pretty lucky. Your stuff's on the table over there. Yes, thank you, Terezi said pointedly. Slick fumbled with his hat for a moment, then sat down where he had been earlier. Let's get out of here. Terezi. Let's get out of here, Terezi hissed. I've got a spider to squish. They stepped back out onto the moonlit street. John inhaled deeply. The air still stank, but it was a relief from all the smoke. Terezi quickened her pace. Knuckles clenched around her dragon-headed cane, and lips pursed. So, what exactly is she? Tell me you know it. So where exactly is she? Tell me you know at least that, Carquette said. Somewhere no one would think to look. Up, she answered without looking back. All right, whatever that means, Carquette muttered, but she didn't respond. What agreement did you two have? Kanaya said quietly. Terezi shook her head. Nothing important. Please tell me there aren't going to be repercussions for this. That's the reason we have to get rid of Mindfang in the first place. No, I'll be fine. It'll be fine. You'll be fine. What exactly did you promise her in exchange for Mindfang's location? Terezi whipped her head around, the lenses on her glasses flashing in the moonlight. Lay off me, okay? I'm doing this for you. For all of you. So you don't get killed. This has nothing to do with me in the first place. But I chose to help you. Don't complain about how I do it. Kanaya opened her mouth, then closed it again, without saying anything. Expressionless, Terezi turned around and began walking again. Everyone followed suit, exchanging glances. They walked for another hour before Terezi finally signaled them to stop. As they got further and further away from the 8-ball, more people started appearing, passing the group on the street or simply skulking around in corners and alleyways. Usually these shadowy figures made no sound, just stared from glowing eyeballs that illuminated strange and dirty faces. Kanaya, Terezi, and Carquette had meddled the group into a circle form, shoving Solix, Jade, and John into the middle of them. All three were brandishing knives. Kanaya and Carquette had thrown hoods over their head, but Terezi remained in her red and teal. Nobody should try anything. Red glare's known well enough around here, but just in case. Kanaya had whispered out of the corner of her mouth. Jade, keep your skin covered. John, try not to let them see your eyes. They had nodded and flipped their hoods up. Jade ducking her head. Solix then switched to grab onto John's arm when Carquette moved to the back of the group. He clenched tightly above the elbow, clearly tense. It's usually me on guard too, he whispered to John's ear. Kinda nice this way. I just wish I could see if one of them was gonna jump. They aren't doing much, John answered quietly. Besides, I'd probably scream or some shit, so you'd be able to tell. Thanks. I'm glad my weeniness is convenient. Solix chuckled, then winced as Carquette socked him in the back. Shut up, both of you. Terezi turned to the right, skittering down a thin, slanting alleyway. Okay, we've got to stop. The sun's gonna come up soon and there's still a ways to go. There's a couple of buildings around here we could crash in. John glanced up. The skin was an alarming shade of purple. They ended up sleeping in the corner of a shop, squished together in a large pile of teenagers and weapons. John had uncomfortably realized this, having awoken in the middle of the day, he reminded himself, middle of the day, to find Kanaya's chainsaw an inch from his face. He gingerly extracted his hand from the pile of limbs and torsos to grab the handle and push the chainsaw out to the middle of the dusty floor. Sunlight was streaming behind the curtains, casting two thin rays of light across the floor, but thankfully not reaching the corner. It had been a gamble sleeping in here. They didn't realize how far the sun would creep in. But everyone had elected Jade to sleep the furthest from the corner, and everyone else to make do. John sighed. He still wasn't completely used to sleeping when it was so bright out. He stared down at Jade, who looked innocent and younger without her glasses, which were in the center of the room with John's, Terezi's, and the chainsaw. She lay slumped on the floor, hair moving ever so slightly with each exhale. She looked so human, so out of place. but it was still a relieving sight. Kanaya's legs were thrown over Jade's dark, slim jeans with elegant boots. Her torso lay overlapping John's. Her torso lay overlapping John's, her body moving with each of his exhales. John lay on Carquette's back, who was curled over Solix's. Trezzy was slightly apart, the tip of her horn linked with Kanaya's, which would probably be embarrassing when they woke up to find themselves accidentally latched. She slept on her back, knife clenched to her side. John looked at it sadly, remembering what Kanaya had explained earlier. However, for now at least, while the sun streamed outside, they were protected by a fortress of heat and light. Just for a few hours, they could all just lay and breathe as one creature, who was dreaming and unafraid. John closed his eyes, letting his breath slowly escape from his lips. His problems would return, but they would belong in the world of purples and blacks, not in this strange yellow and orange state. Just for a few more hours, they were safe.